I'm going to say welcome. Thank you for coming out to the Wayland Library tonight. We are excited to have Robert Megadichian, am I saying that the right way, here with us tonight to share Love in Metal, his father's work. Robert owns an architectural consulting business. I'm going to let you introduce your dad, okay? And I'm going to introduce you.
Oh, okay. All right.
Robert owns an architectural consulting business and has as his hobby restoring baseball gloves. The Boston Globe has called him the Glove Whisperer. He's the host and producer of the television program Follow Your Muse at Methuen Community Studios, and he's looking for people to come on his show as guests to discuss their muse and their passion. He's a student in a painting class at the Methuen Senior Center and a beginner. He's creating his renditions in watercolor of his father's metal art. He is delighted to give us our presentation today, and I'm delighted to have him.
Oh, thank you.
2 housekeeping notes. We are recording this, so you'll be able to watch on our YouTube page and Waycam, our community broadcast. And if you're joining us on Zoom, feel free to put your questions in the chat at any time, and I will raise my hand and read them aloud.
That's fine.
All right. Hand it over.
Okay. So Abraham Megadichian was a career machinist who worked in a factory making aircraft engine parts. In his spare time, Abe crafted from scrap metal his interpretations of everyday objects in miniature and full size. At the time of his passing in 1983, Abe left behind hundreds of objects, many of which he had made as gifts for his family and friends. In 2013, Abe's son, that's me, and daughter-in-law Becky opened a crate that Abe himself had made and locked. It contained many of Abe's art pieces. After documenting the pieces, Robert committed himself to a mission to have Abe recognized as a bona fide artist and his machine pieces as art. Since then, Robert has had the pieces exhibited at over 24 venues in New England, Arizona, and most recently at the National Museum of Toys and Miniatures in Kansas City. Pieces are on virtual display in California. In conjunction with his quest to recognize his father, Robert enrolled in the graduate level nonprofit management program at Worcester State University in Massachusetts, hoping to one day open the Megadichian Museum to feature Abraham's art. In 2022, Robert completed his studies and received his Master of Science degree. So we did this in kind of reverse order. So that's that. So thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. I'll set the stage. My father was part of that greatest generation, and things made in America were very important to him. So this is his Bulova Made in America watch. This was his high school graduation ring. We'll be talking about that. This necktie features some of the objects that, I don't know if any of them are here actually, but these are some of his objects. And just for good measure, the socks, these socks match this tie. So this is a little different, I think, at least I'm told. So it involves some reading, but you'll understand what's going on. So, Dad, I'm here at the Wayland Library to give another presentation about you and your artwork. So that's great, Rob. As an introduction, Dad, please tell the folks about yourself, starting with your background. Well, Rob, Grandma and Grandpa were immigrants from Armenia and both passed through Ellis Island. Grandpa went to Franklin, Massachusetts to live with his uncle, and Grandma came later as a mail order bride. That's another story. We moved to an apartment in Cambridge when I was about 6 years old. So here he is at about 6 in Cambridge. Among our neighbors were many Italians, Portuguese, Irish, and Armenians. Rob, we only spoke Armenian at home and didn't speak English till I entered school. And just for the record, I didn't speak English till I entered school. So we spoke Armenian at home. So I think my English has come a long way since then. So, and what about high school, Dad? Well, Rob, I was among a dozen would-be machinists in a special machining class at Ringe Tech in Cambridge, where I graduated in 1942. That's the date on this ring. Because of the war and shortages of things like paper, we didn't get a yearbook. So this may be a substitute for his lack of having a yearbook. But being wartime, Rob, upon graduation, I got a job right away at General Electric in Everett, making airplane engine parts. So you didn't stay long at GE, Dad, for in 1943, you joined the Navy, right? Well, that's right, Rob. Nearly all the guys enlisted in those days. I got stationed in the Pacific aboard an LCI, that's short for Landing Craft Infantry, a relatively short ship, 150 feet long. We ferried Marines and delivered supplies right up onto the beaches in the Philippines. So here's a picture of his ship. And here's a picture of him in his uniform. And the C stands for cook. So he was the ship's cook. Then I got honorably discharged in 1946 and got my machinist job right back at GE, but in Lynn. In 1951, I bought our only house in Cambridge. So tell us a bit about your work at GE, Dad. So Rob, during the 30-minute lunch break, I'd buy some scrap metal at the recycling bin. I began making replacement parts for things that were broken at home. My machinist, fellow machinists started calling me the Tinkerer, which coincidentally my shipmates called me too, because I often had to repair equipment in my gal ship. What household replacement parts did you make, Dad? Rob, I made a lot of handles, like the spare ones for my lunch pail. So this is his standard lunch pail. You could buy that. But that's his replacement steel handle. And for good measure, he made a replacement handle out of aluminum. Or the brass handles for Mark's snakeskin pocketbook. So these are brass and not the original to this bag. Mom loved this bag, but she said when he put the brass handles on it, they were too heavy. Or the aluminum replacement part for the shoe tree. So if you have shoe trees, and they might look like that with plastic, well, when they break, of course you're going to go and make all metal part for it, right? You don't just go out and buy a new one. That's the way my father worked. Or the handle for your little red wagon. Dad, the wagon doesn't look red. It was, Rob, when you were only 2 years old. Now that's the replacement handle that he made for this wagon, which we still have. But that's me in that wagon when it was red with the broken handle. This is 1955. So, Dad, what was up with the lavender color? So, Rob, sometime after I took that photo of you, I came across some paint. Knowing how much your sister liked purple, I started painting everything that color. Your wagon, the basement stairs, even the solid steel headache ball for the end of a cable of a construction crane. I painted the ball, chained it around your brother-in-law's ankle at your sister's shower as a gag. So this is the ball. So here's the crane, and the line comes down, and at the end of the day, this ball is hanging from it, and it keeps the line from whipping all over the place. That ball weighs 40 pounds. Okay, so now we got the chain and everything. He paints the whole thing. And of course, John had to stay for the entire shower. So Dad, you made your own power tools too. Yes, I made a compressor on wheels and a belt sander for which I used 2 rubber rollers from an ancient washing machine and a bandsaw. Dad, none of those old power tools exist except for the buffer grinder. So this is his buffer grinder. Well, that's good, Rob. I reused an old Maytag washing machine motor and made salvage. Well, just so you know, Dad, I had that machine exhibited twice. Or I had it fumigated because insects had gotten into those 2x4 legs. So this rickety thing still works. You remember my shish kebab machine from 1969. So here he is with his shish kebab machine. This is in our backyard in Cambridge. I remember, Dad, how you could cook shish kebab for throngs of people with this thing. Armenians, and Armenians eat lamb and more lamb, so that the machine really got a workout. You'd turn the handle and spin all the skewers at once, which were mounted on gears. Now, Dad, he set it up so that there could be a motor to do this automatically, but he took that away. I don't think he really liked that. So I'm going to show another picture related to this later on. So Dad, tell the folks how you got started making gifts for all of us in the family. Well, Rob, after I made replacement items and more at lunch, at work, I'd rough out some pizzas on my Bridgeport milling machine. I'm going to show you a picture of one to work on them in my basement workshop. So here he is working on the truck on display here in the case. So this is May of 1953, and he's making this truck for me, and I am like 4 months old. Okay, very appropriate gift. Like when you start, like when you started, okay. So Dad, so here's the truck. That's the truck, and that's on display. And Dad, the curtain at the rear of the trailer is reminiscent of Methuen duck cloth, which is still made where I live. So here's the same tractor, but with a car carrier. Those ramps on the back are actually replacements. Somehow the actual ramps got lost. And so I contacted a cousin of mine who lives in California. He has a machine shop. And I sent him the specifications, and he made those ramps for me as replacements. And then there's again, the same tractor, but this is the log carrier. Well, those logs were actually broomsticks. Now, this is 1950s, so the chances are that those logs, those broomsticks, have lead paint. So another good gift for an infant, okay? So Rob, making my interpretations of everyday items was becoming a real hobby. I just wanted to make more and more pieces, so I started creating them for every holiday, birthday, anniversary, graduation, and so on. The GE guys all competent machinists like me would come over at lunchtime and ask if they could watch me create these gifts. I found that flattering. So here he is with his fellow machinists, and that's him in the lower left, seated. So this is about 1960. So Dad, let's get back to my little red wagon. How did you come up with the idea of a miniature of it? Well, Rob, with the wagon and practically everything else, and make someone smile. So this is his version of that same wagon. It's about this big. Well, Dad, your artwork has been making people smile for quite a while. In the 1970s, you had 3 exhibits in Massachusetts, a one-man show at the Arlington Public Library, another one-man show at the Newton Public Library, and a 3rd show with other artists in our St. Stephen's Armenian Church Hall in Watertown. And so here he is with some of his pieces. This is sometime late 70s. Well, Rob, I did enjoy those opportunities to exhibit my pieces. I liked walking around the room and talking to our friends while Mom minded the exhibit. And those are my mom's legs. So in that time, they just put them out on the table like that. There wasn't much security concern, and there's a lot of pieces there, and they just did it. Dad, what do you think was the best part of those exhibits? Rob, I'm sure the folks there at the library will appreciate that nothing gave me a thrill as much or toys I had made. And like what, Dad? The tiny brass turtle with the smile on his face. That's only this big. The aluminum starfish pendant. The full-size clamshell. For Rob, I made the aluminum frog for your sister as a housewarming present after she married and bought her house. I hinged it so she could hide a spare key for the house in its belly. And it is out there in the exhibit case with its mouth somewhat open and a little key put in there. Rob, I even made several aluminum bird houses. As far as I know, they all had birds living in them. And I will be showing some more pictures about bird houses a little later on. Now tell us, Dad, about your and Mom's personal favorites among the several hundred items that you crafted. Rob, I think Mom really appreciated the 80 or so jewelry pieces I made for her. These are all made out of stainless steel, so they're a little on the heavy side. Her name was Eugenia. In Armenian, her name was Ojen. That became Eugenia. Eugenia became Jenny, and that's why we're going to see some J's in the jewelry. And being industrial, he had access to ball bearings, so they showed up a lot. This was one of her favorites. So Rob, aside from jewelry, I based my brass roller skates on your mother's old skates. And those are my mother's actual skates from a time when they clamped onto the bottom of your shoes, and you would tighten how tight or loose they gripped your shoes with this key, and then you strapped it around your ankle. So those are my mom's. We have those. And those are his. So those are this big, and these are made out of brass. Rob, I really enjoyed making the brass sled. I used Mom's flexible flyer from the days when she was a kid and sledded down the High Rock area in Lynn. So that's her actual sled. It was a big one, about this big. We have that. And that's his version of it. And it says flexible flyer. So Rob, one of Mom's favorite items, as well as everyone else's, was the piano I made for her. And that's a piano. This is about this big. This is actually a music box. And the key is down here. You wind it here. All the hinges that would be on a regular piano are here, and they all work. I incorporated the music box that plays B.J. Thomas's Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head, but because of its age, it now plays somewhat slowly, and we don't play it much. Dad, wasn't the piano a piece someone wanted to purchase from you? Well, yes, Rob. A fellow offered the equivalent of several weeks' pay for it back in 1973, but I just couldn't part with it, thankfully. But Rob, undoubtedly, Mom's all-time favorite was the brass violin that I made for her. I used the actual instrument that your sisters played in the school orchestra as the model. So this is the actual violin. And I made a dimensioned sketch of it. And this is the violin. It's about this big. The violin fits in the case closes, and the bow has real horsehair. It just doesn't play. Of the violin makes me many other sketches. How did you create the pieces with such scaled precision? Rob, I just had an eye for it. Achkit chap, as they say in Armenia. Here for a forklift truck on the back of a computer programming card from the 1970s. So that's his sketch on one of those cards from the 1970s. And that's his version, again about this big, the forklift truck with the block of metal. In those days, Rob, as you remember from engineering school, it took hundreds of pages like that to run a program, and man, were you up the creek if you got them in the wrong order. So Powerboat, Rob, I created in 1967. I used a picture from an advertising magazine as my model. So here's the magazine. It's for a 1960 DeSoto, but the boat's in the background. And here's his version of it, and he numbered it 62367. So Dad, tell us about your personal favorite items. Rob, my personal favorites tended to be those items that people don't necessarily find attractive. Like what, Dad? Like the copper trash barrel. That's this big. It was a machining challenge getting the taper right, and the fluting exact. The fluting being these grooves, and the lid fits precisely. So other items, Dad? Garbage pail. Okay. Does anybody know what this is?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
It's the link to the garbage that's in the ground.
Right, right. So those of you who may not know what this is, this was a big thing in the city. In Cambridge, everybody had this, all right? So this device sits in a hole in the ground. And so when you had your garbage, didn't have a garbage disposal necessarily. You probably didn't at that time. All right, so now you have the apple cores and all that stuff, the eggshells. You bring them to this device. And this thing is set in the ground, and you could open it up, and there would be a canister in a pail inside of this. You'd throw that garbage into that, okay, and close it up. So now here it is, open. So now imagine that there's a pail that goes into this hole, which is sitting in the ground, okay? So now once a week, along with your trash pickup, there was another truck that would come that had a hopper on the back, and some guy would come out from that truck. He would walk into your yard. He would open this thing, take that pail out, take the pail back to the truck, throw it in, and then return the pail back to its location. No garbage in it, but full of flies and all that stuff, okay? Not very attractive, okay? You can find one of these without the pail on eBay for about $250, in case you want that one.
Oh, I still have mine.
It's still in the ground? Yeah. So at the house, I moved from Cambridge to Methuen only 3 years ago. I lived in that house in Cambridge until 3 years ago. And we didn't have ours anymore, but then because we did some new paving. But the neighbors still have, they don't use it. Nobody uses these things. But if anything, people open them up and they put like flowers or something like that in there. Okay, so these are not very attractive items, but Dad, his version of it. So his is this big. Now, you have to remember, this guy was machining aircraft engine parts, which have what's called small tolerance. In other words, they can't be off by much. Much meaning a portion of a thickness of one hair. That's how precise things are. Well, this pail just glides into this thing and just glides out. It's a piece of work in the positive sense. And here it is, taken out. So these are the individual pieces of that. People get a charge out of this, and some people do remember having them. That was a pretty smelly thing. It just, good riddance to that. But we have the artwork. So, okay, more Dad. I always wanted a Homburg hat, Rob, so I made myself one. And so there's this hat, which is about this big. I'm going to show you another picture of this later. This is copper and brass. And then I always wanted, he says, a stand for my bedroom. So I made one of the furniture. So he made this. This is also this big. Almost everything is about this size. Rob, I like the aluminum quill pen with the ink pot. So I had to find a large feather as the model. This piece is out here on display. And everyone liked my brass antique car, which was based on a coin slot bank. So the bank gave us kids a bank. Put coins in. There's a slot on the top. So that's the one. That's the actual bank. And then here's his interpretation of the same thing in brass. This is particularly heavy. It's about this big. And its number plate says 1924. And they like the wagon with the keg, too. So here's the wagon, a little bit big, with the keg that's removable. And Rob, the aluminum bathtub with clawed feet was popular. So here it is. The handles turn. There are clawed feet. And there is a tiny, half the size of your fingernail, drain cover. So we have to be real careful with this one that we don't lose that little drain cover. And here's a picture. It was based on it's based on you, Rob, after you had had a bit of a scrape in the backyard. So that's me on a bad day. So the kerosene lamp was also popular. There it is. And I like the heavy brass water pump lamp that I based on the wooden lamp that you made in woodworking class in the 7th grade. Well, I was in woodworking in 8th grade, and I made a lamp that looks like this. This was not my lamp, but I don't know if you fellows had made them. In those days, the boys went to woodworking class and the girls went to home ec class. So I made a lamp that looked like this. That's all that's left of my lamp, the bucket, okay? And that's his version of it. So this lamp is in use in our house, and if my wife wants to dust, or if I dust, it takes an effort to lift this thing. It weighs over 20 pounds. It doesn't go anywhere. So Dad, you said the lamp was heavy. Tell us about the weight of some of your pieces. Some of the pieces. Now this was General Electric. During the war they employed 23,000 people. An immense facility. Currently they employ probably 3,500 people. So the parking lot is huge. And taking this stuff to the car was not easy. So here's the 11-pound asphalt roller. And then here is the 17-pound blowtorch. This is full size. And here's the 19-pound candlestick telephone. So this is about full size too. This one piece was displayed at the New Hampshire Telephone Museum, for which they built a special case and they had to really bolt it into the... It was the only item in that, as you walked in to pay your admission, it had a little like phone booth with this phone in it. It was words about the game you made. Well, Rob, first and foremost, was the aluminum backgammon set, which you and your sisters must have played hundreds of games on, often in front of Grandma. Well, here's the backgammon set. And this is 1969. Now, backgammon, for those of you who play the game, it can be a loud game, people smacking the so-called stones down, right? Most people have them in like plastic stones and maybe a cork or a wood board. Metal board with metal pieces, which means that it's a super loud game, okay, just by definition. And here I am playing with my sister in front of Grandma. There'll be another picture of this. And by the way, this is the boat that I showed. This is the boat. In those days, the pieces sat on like all the furniture. So there's a table here, there's a piece sitting on it. There's a clock sitting on a little table over there. That's where the TV was with the rabbit ears. But in our house, there were any surface had Dad's things sitting on it. And then he built shelves, and the shelves overflowed, and then he case that he locked up. It goes on. The metal book paperweights that you made us, some of which are on display here. Rob, all the college graduations were special, so I engraved my metal books with your names, schools, and years of graduation. Well, Dad, I really liked your aluminum dice bookends with the unlabeled books, which you intended as future gifts. Oh, that's not it. Where'd it go? Oh, there it is. So there are books here, and they are unmarked. So we don't know who they were going to be for, but they were intended for other people. And then he made a lot of bookends, and a lot with dice. He made them out of brass. He made them out of aluminum. So this is one set. And then he figured out a way to mount them like that. Dad, you even made Mom an aluminum book at many years after she graduated from nursing school and was working as a corporate nurse. So this is my mother on graduation day. This is like 1950, Lynn Hospital. And the story goes that right after, well, my father had proposed before she graduated, but my grandfather said, not until she graduates. So he had to wait. And then as soon as they got married, and then they bought the house, and it was the one house, like I said. So elaborate, Dad, if you will, on the gifts you made for people outside of the family. Well, Rob, I made for several friends paperweights and for others small dinner bells on which I mounted cast eagles. So there's a lot of people got these. And then there were the pin cushions. Various people got these, including my wife, Becky. And there were many vases. So there's one vase. There were a lot of vases. There were a lot of candle holders. But this vase was special. My brother-in-law's sister got married around the same time my sister got married. And my father made this vase for them as a wedding present. It's about this high, and it's fairly heavy. It's made out of aluminum. So a few years ago, after I had started this campaign with all this artwork, the woman, this is not my sister's sister-in-law, called her up and said, we're downsizing, and we want to bring this particular vase to you so that it comes back to the family and back into the collection. I mean, this is like unheard of. So right around the same time, coincidentally, another fellow called me up, and he said, your father made some saws with handles for me. Your father made me a van, like because he had a van, and he made me a book, which is here, and he made me, there was something else. Oh, he made me the panic button, which is also here. And he said the same thing, almost word for word, that this other woman had said. He said, look, your father made these as presents for me. I think they belong with the collection. And I said to him, my father gave you these as a gift. How can I take that back? And he said, well, I would feel better if you did. And I said, well, I don't feel comfortable doing that. So we bantered back and forth. And finally I said, okay, here's the compromise. I will accept these items back from you on one basis, that you allow me to call them a loan. You can have them back anytime you want. No hard feelings, but I will take them and say that it's a permanent loan. And we did. So the collection is bigger. I mean, I can't think of another example. I don't know of one where somebody's collection gets bigger after the artist dies. Lost my place. So, Dad, tell us about your closest friends and what you made for them. Well, Rob, your mom's and my best friends were 5 other couples from church. Marilyn, do you recognize any of these people? Marilyn and I go to the same church.
I'm afraid I don't.
Okay. So you're going to see this picture again. This portfolio is going to show some other things. So, now, I'm going to do this in order. I'm trying to figure out where I'm going with this. This is my father. This is my mother. This woman is her husband. This guy, his wife, with her arm around, whose wife is the photographer. is married to this guy, and this guy is married to this woman. So here's the story. So on Saturdays, usually this woman and my mother would be talking like 11 o'clock on a Saturday morning. What are you guys doing tonight? Nothing. All right, then are we going to get together at your house or my house? Oftentimes it would be at our house. And then she would have it a lot, and the other women would host it too. So 11 o'clock in the morning, they decide that they're going to get together tonight at 6 o'clock. By 6 o'clock, all of these people are showing up together. They open up the freezer. They take out the Armenian rolls, the choregs, okay? They take out the string cheese. They put all kinds of mezes out. And they're having a heck of a good time. And then they bring the scotch out. So now my father makes a gift. He wants to make a gift for everybody. So he makes a stand that holds 12 toothpicks. They're swords. There's 6 of these sabers and 6 of these. Each one, every one of these 12, now these things are only this big, all right? This stand, this part is brass. The swords are aluminum. So he machines the hilts, the handles, all differently. Every one is different. So everybody could tell which one is theirs and which ones aren't. Well, the thing was that after all the scotch, nobody could tell the difference anyway. And then the evening would conclude with strong Armenian coffee. So I'm going to show you a picture of of those people. Next week, I'm going on a cruise. And it turns out that the guy who booked the cruise is the son of one of those people. So the cycle is continuing. I'll tell you more about it. So here are the swords all taken out. They loved them. And saucer, copper. So there it is. And yes, Rob, but that wasn't for drinking out of. I learned the hard way. So he drank hot coffee out of this thing, and of course he burnt his lip. Dad, I remember how much you talked about the machinist toolbox that you crafted. Tell us about that. Well, Rob, my actual toolbox, this is a real toolbox about this big. Okay, these drawers all open up. This was made by a company called Gerstner. They're out of Ohio. This is your real American product. This box, if you were to buy it, they still make them today. If you were to buy that box, it's about $2,000. Okay? Very intricate, very shallow drawers, etc. This is his version of it. So this is about this big, a little bigger than a football. And there's about 40 pieces that came out of this, and they range in size from tiny little things about this big to the hammer, which is about that big. So all of this stuff goes neatly in these drawers, and again, being a machinist, these drawers just glide in, and the top closes and whatever. This box and the other one have been on display side by side twice. So this took him about 1 year to do this with all these little pieces. So, Dad, I suspect my allotted time is running out. As you look back, what do you think your major accomplishments were? Well, Rob, raising you and your sisters with your mom was most important, along with taking care of Grandma and Grandpa and having steady work after the war. Dad, you didn't mention your artwork. Rob, that was okay, but I didn't consider myself an artist. Really, Dad? Well, it was important to me that I serve and I did for 25 years on the executive committee of the Saturday Armenian Language School. I said we didn't speak English till we were in grammar school. 25 years he served on that board, and getting the award from the Archbishop was genuinely special. Here he is with the award. Well, Dad, you're pretty special. Rob, don't go getting mushy. By the way, can you remind me of some of the exhibits you've had? Well, Dad, I'm pleased to tell you that since 2014, your art has been on display, and this is a short list. The Boston and Providence Children's Museums, the Lynn Museum, given that GE is in Lynn, and Mom came from Lynn, the Museum of Science in Boston, the New Hampshire Telephone Museum, which I mentioned, Stonehill College, where the students in the public history class curated and installed the exhibit. And then I mentioned earlier the Mini Time Machine Museum of Miniatures in Tucson, Arizona, and most recently the National Toy and Miniatures Museum in Kansas City, Missouri. Your art got covered in an article in the Boston Globe, then a follow-up story on WCVB Chronicle, Boston, also on a story on national radio. So that you know, Dad, I'm into a couple of other things. I'm looking for a publisher for a book about you and your art. The book is in first draft. And there's exhibits going on all the time. And I'm taking a watercolor painting class at the local senior center, and I'm using your art as my model. Now, this is where I show you the portfolio. So I went to the senior center in Methuen, and I saw that they had painting class. So I registered, and they said, all right, what do you want to paint? How do you want to paint? I said, I don't know. I don't know anything about painting. Nothing. Like since I was a kid. I like watercolor. All right, we'll do watercolor. Okay. Do you know anything about this? No, I don't know how to hold a paintbrush. I don't know anything. I'm like putty in your hands. Okay. So what are you going to paint? I'm going to take his objects one by one and paint them. They're made out of metal. So we're going to get some metallic watercolor paint. All right. So now I'm learning how to paint. And I'm painting one object after another. All right. So now I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm having a heck of a good time. So this is as of like February of this year. Okay. Can you see that? Okay. Now, these are not to say this stuff is great. This is to say this is the progress, okay? So they're copper and they're brass, and some of these things I've already shown you, and I'm having a heck of a good time. And so various people are painting various things. You know, a lot of people painting flowers or their pet or whatever, and here I am painting metal. And they go, oh, that's kind of cool, kind of different. You saw that one. Okay, fine. Well, I'm painting these. I'm painting them, and I said, oh, okay, you know, people are saying they're cool and they're nice and all that, but let's do something else. So I took that. In this example, here's that hat that I was telling you about, the Homburg. My father goes into the service not smoking. He comes out an addicted smoker. All right. Now he smokes for 20 years. Then he quits for 20 years, all right? Unfortunately, he died of lung cancer. All right, but, so I said, just for laughs, I said, maybe the groove in the hat was a place to put the cigarette. So now this picture starts this whole trend, all right? There's a few more things. Okay, fine. And at some point, these are the saws. All right. So I'm having a good time, and I'm saying, I got to experiment more. There's a ship. So now it starts with birdhouses. So he makes that birdhouse, all right? And he made several of them. One of them with the very cousin that made those the tracks for the car, all right? So there's a birdhouse in California. One sister has one. One sister has one. There's one at the house in Cambridge. So I painted the birdhouse and put birds in. And the next thing I know, they said, "Oh, you got to exhibit this here in Methuen. We're going to have an artist day." Okay, so I exhibit them in Methuen. All right. Then I said, I come across this absolutely gorgeous book about industrial photography. And I'm flipping through this book, beautiful book. And there's a jet engine made at GE. And this guy, whoever he is standing next to this jet engine. So I paint the jet engine. I cut the guy's head out, and I cut Dad's head in. Okay, so here's Dad's head on that other guy's body with the GE engine. This is how big these things are, right? So now all of a sudden it's like, these are special. These are really cool. I go, it's just a picture of my father cut onto another thing. Oh, you got to do more of this. Okay, that was then. All right, so now, so this is Dad in his galley. All right, well, there's one ship that looks like the ship that you saw. And that ship, they made 1,000 of these things. They served right through Vietnam, all right? Well, the ship that he was on, who knows what happened to that ship. But one like it is in the Willamette River in Portland, Oregon. I went there with my son, took a lot of pictures in this tiny galley. Now, he's the cook on this ship. He cooks for a crew of 23, 24 people every day, 3 meals. Marines get on this ship. They bring their own food. So like Spam, the real Spam, okay, in their rucksack. So here is my interpretation of that galley, again with his face on it. So people are having a blast. So here's my mother, my father. Here she is with that same pocketbook with the heavy brass handles. And here he is with his lunch pail, which I substituted, okay. Obviously he wasn't wearing a lunch pail to dinner that night, but he was in this picture. Here's my grandfather counting coins, and here's the bank that my father had made for $50. Okay, Dad, what are we going to do with this bank? There's no way to open it. So how many $50 are in it? 1, 50, 150? Am I going to break the bank open to find out? So here's my sister and I in a soapbox for 2. So we had this, and we went down the neighborhood with this thing. We had a lot of fun with that soapbox. And here's my mother on her graduation day. Well, you saw her picture. Well, the bat's over here, okay, and the ball's over here too. So here's this. We're back to this picture. So my wife and I had dinner with this guy. Wait a minute. This guy, and this woman. Their son is the travel agent. So I whipped out this picture, and the guy's going berserk. He goes, "Oh my God, I haven't seen a picture of my father and mother like this for years." I mean, she's been gone for a long time. Where is she? Here. So the photographer of the picture that you saw, the actual photographer, here she is. I plugged her in there. And she is the only one who's alive. She's over 90. And this woman, we were trying to get her to make 100. She made it to 99 and a half. 99 and a half she made it. So all these people are gone, but they're very special to me. And this guy, and where's his wife? Where'd she go? Oh yeah, the photographer and he, their grandson is my conservator of all these artworks. So he cleans them and fixes them and all that sort of thing. And what I did was I inserted Dad's little sword thing, and I matched everybody up by color. So because they're not with their spouses, I put them next to their spouses in color. So these have become really popular. So in California, my cousin produces a photograph. These were Fedai fighters. These were freedom fighters back during the genocide time. My father had made this emblem. I threw that in, and I painted all these guys with their faces, and I sent this out to California as a thank you for making the ramp. Here's my grandmother with the two of us, and again, here's one of Dad's vases. I threw that in. They all have his artwork in them. So here are the two grandmothers. Again, vases here. And I love this one. This is a picture of denture that my father had made. But here's a picture of my grandfather extracting my tooth. Okay, and if you look real careful, here he is. Carefully, he's holding it up, and there's my tooth on the end of the pliers, which he put in boiling water. Okay, I felt a lot better about that. And here, my wife and I with the stopper for the 5-gallon water jug. And here are the ashtrays. I don't think they were ashtrays. I think that they were trays on which my 101-year-old grandmother burned incense. So I put that in. Here's my sister and I playing on that same backgammon. Here are the salt and pepper shakers with my grandparents and other grandparents. My father with a camera, my aunt getting married. I used all the shoes on the steps. I threw those in just for laughs. And cannons go boom. He made cannons. And this is my grandson. So this kid is 6 months old, and he's painting already in nursery. I couldn't believe it. When they told me that, I said, this is unbelievable that kid is painting. And here we are at Disney before the baby was born with the so-called new rides, the windmill that he made and this pencil and pen and all that holder. So what happened? Now, I'm not bragging. I'm really not bragging. I'm just having the time of my life with this painting stuff. Well, the teacher one day said to me after class, can I talk to you after class? And I said, okay, what's up? She said, I'm going to be teaching a class about technique and stuff to high school kids. Would you mind coming and talking about what you're doing with this? This is the beginner. I'm like the beginner's beginner. I said, come on, you want me to do that? You got to get somebody who knows what they're talking about. She says, I like what you're doing, and I would like you to come with those kids in high school. So I said, yes, of course. So this is a Bridgeport milling machine. This is the meat and potatoes machine that my father would have used to gouge metal. So I painted that, and here's a lathe. Again, these would have been very common where he worked. And here's his buffing machine. I have buffed objects with this machine. This is the one that we still have. And these are now from memory. So this was the table saw that he had made. Extremely dangerous machine because the blade, which was huge, going around like this, would jump off the track, and you'd jump and then the sanding machine. I've sanded wood a lot on this machine, this very machine. And there he is with the shish kebab machine. So I'm having a lot of fun, and people like seeing them. I found that when I showed things like, if I showed, okay, here's the object, here's the compressor, people go, oh, that's nice. But when I show this, people have the same smile you have. And I think that that's what my teacher wants to kind of play up with these high school kids. I just have a few more shots. By the way, we've had some publications. This one was particularly good because after the publication came out, I got a little check in the mail. It's like, oh my God, I wasn't expecting that at all. Just a few more things. Let's see, what's left here? All right, so I'm winding up. Am I doing okay? All right. So I just told Dad that I'm doing the painting class, all right? And he says, that's very cool, Rob. Ur der ein Ur. You know what that means? Ur der ein Ur? from where to where? Loosely translated, who would have known? It came out of nowhere. All right. And then Serket Talar, have you heard that expression? It just means keep up the good work. Okay. So I will, Dad. I will. So now let me show you. This is quick. So here he is at a bending machine. And here they are. This was on Hanover Street in the North End in Boston. And 1971 photo. Oh. So these are those glasses. And I can see you perfectly fine, but these are with lenses for the computer. So things are going around. The cycle is continuing. What else do we have here for you? And here I was in Cambridge at an office, and these were some of the pieces. This is reminiscent of that picture with my mother, just sitting around the table with the stuff. People would come to my office and see them, and we would negotiate, when are you free to exhibit, all that kind of thing. And I talked about birdhouses. So this is the birdhouse at my sister's house, which they have on the porch, and here's a little friend who lives in that birdhouse. So this birdhouse was made 50 years ago, and it has an occupant. So I think this is a pretty good story with that. And I showed you that one. And here's my sister and I. And that. So people had soapbox racers, but I don't know anybody who had one for two people. This was a dual, and it had a steering wheel, not just a cord. And this is my little Bedros. So he's 6 months old. And there we go. I think that's it. That's it. So that's it. So anybody have a question? Anybody on Zoom have a question? So the box. So when I was I was well into this project, and I was at Worcester State, and Michael and I went to Worcester State together. Michael started after I did, but graduated before I did, because he was crazy enough to take more than one class at a time. I only took one. And so while I was at Worcester State, and I graduated 2 years ago, I got a degree in nonprofit management, master's degree. It hasn't bought anything yet, but that's okay. I had fun. So I wrote an article that got published in Bridgewater State, which is sister school to Worcester State. And it was called Opening the Box. So what Dad did was he had shelves in the house, and these pieces would come home. Okay, so it's your birthday, here's your birthday present. It's your anniversary, Jenny, so here's your anniversary present. And it's going on and on. And now 3 kids, a lot of holidays, 30 years. If you do the math, you get a lot of objects. So now he built shelves in the house, and here's your new gift. The last gift goes on the shelf. There's a certain rotation going on here, okay? Like they recycle in retail. So he had a box that we call the sundug. He called it the sundug, which is the Armenian word for crate. So the crate's about this long. It's made out of wood. It's got a hasp on it. And he puts all these objects in. After they come off the shelves, they go into the box. He locks up the box. And he dies. Now what? Well, the box sits in the basement. Remember, this is the house I lived in forever. So one day, Becky says, "What's in the box?" It's covered with all kinds of stuff. That's Dad's stuff. We'll open it. I don't know where the key is. All right, so now Dad is an engineer, but not really, but kind of does that. And he's a tinkerer, right? So he looks at the basement, and he's got all these joists that are running this way, so he screws slats. The joists run this way, and they're visible. He puts slats this way, and then he drills the lids of Maxwell House instant coffee bottles up to those slats, and he hangs from them jars. The basement's covered with, like, if you look around with all these lights, imagine they're all jars. And they're all full of nuts and bolts and this and that and this and that and this and that and keys. I go, oh, this has got to be it. Take the jar down, open it up. There's a tag on the key written in Armenian that says, "The things I've made." This has got to be it. Put the key in. The key goes in. Okay, turn the key. It opens the lock. Okay, Becky, you better come down here. So we open it up, and she goes, oh my God. And we start taking them out, one after another, after another. We're down there for 2 hours taking these things out, putting them all over the floor. And I go, oh no, what do we do now? We got stuff all over the floor. There's no documentation. There's nothing. Okay, so we document everything. We photograph everything with our little cameras. And now we say, what do we do? So I contacted the Charles River Museum of Industry, which is in Waltham. I said, maybe we got a chance. It's an industrial museum. I got industrial items. So it's an open house, and it's raining. It's like November. This is November of 2013. So I put my parka on. I took the violin. I put the violin in the case, closed it up, put it inside the Boston Globe plastic bag that I get my delivery in. I go over there, and I said to somebody, there's all these people, and I said, who's the director? And they said, it's that woman over there. So I went over, and I said, will you give me 30 seconds to ask you a question? She said, okay, 30 seconds. I said, I got this piece of artwork in my pocket. If I told you I had 400 pieces like this, would you give me the opportunity to exhibit them here in this building? She said, you did that in 30 seconds. I said, well, what's the answer? She said, can I see them? So I brought her over to that office where these pieces were. And she's like, oh my God, yes, I'll let you exhibit. Okay. So we set it all up. Next thing I know, she calls me and she says, the exhibit's off. We just had a flood. That building, that's a mill building, and it's right on the bend of the river. And we had a flood. We have water up to here. I got to say no. I don't know when we're going to be functioning again. Okay. So I said to Becky, if we got into the Waltham Museum and they're industrial, there's got to be other industrial museums. We live in that part of the country. So I contacted the museum in Attleboro, and I said the same thing to him. I said, will you take a look at them? And the guy said, yeah, I will. I'll come to you and let me look. So he comes and he goes, oh, we want this piece, and we want this piece, this piece, this piece. Okay, now we go to set it up. He retires. So, okay, I'll send you to Carlton. Carlton's going to take over. So Carlton then comes over, and he goes, this is great, great. We're going to do it. So we did. This is 2014. We start up, and we have like 3 months. They're here for 1 month, okay? At the end of 3 months, he said, these are the hottest things in the museum right now. Will you give us 3 more months? Okay. At 6 months, he calls and he says, these are the hottest things. And I said, where are you going? He said, will you let me have them for another 6 months? And then he does it at the end of the year, and now it's 2 years. So 2 years, these objects sat there while we're chasing around with other museums. That was almost 40 museums and libraries ago. So in the last 10 years, we have been on radio, been on television, been in 40 venues. We're going to be at the American Precision Museum in Vermont in the fall. We're going to be at the Norwell Library in the spring. And then this library thing starts. So we were at Tewksbury Library, and the guy who set it up there, Robert Hayes, says to me, "What can I do to help you promote this?" I said, "I don't know, what you have in mind." And he said, "I'm very well connected to the libraries, and I'm kind of like the social media guru." He said, "What if I put the word out for you?" So he does. So he sends an email and that you got, right? And in 1 week, I had 4 libraries lined up. So all of this is happening, and now we have an art collection of my own. So people were saying to me, "So what do you do?" I said, "Well, I got my business and all that, but what do you do? What do you do? Like what your father did?" I said, "Well, nothing." So, oh, now I paint. So there's a book. Maybe someday you'll be in this library. I don't know. So there's a lot of things going on. I don't know if I'll ever open the Megardichian Museum. That takes big, big bucks. And you see how museums close. So that's what I wrote my thesis on. So here I am, having the time of my life, entertaining folks like you, and all because my father made some artwork 40 years ago. I think it's a great story. No brag, just good story. And I'm delighted that you all came out tonight. It's fun for me. As you can tell, I enjoy this. So I'm still open for questions if anybody has them. Yes.
Well, I guess this is, in the sense of, it's a question mixed with sort of some information. And I went on beyond this graduate degree, and I'm now an undergraduate again. So I'm studying history. And one of the things that an article that I literally just read was about essentially what's wrong with the way history is taught. And history has been taught in high school by glamorizing, people and so forth, and making them into heroes, as opposed to telling the real story about what has really happened. Like the story of Helen Keller. Nobody knows that Helen Keller was a socialist, and actually was a communist, and she was a radical. And that is what, after she was able to overcome her disability, she had 2 disabilities. She couldn't hear and she couldn't see. She had a very active life, but that wasn't acceptable as far as history is concerned. And the reason I'm sharing this is because I hear your story, Robert, and this is the story come to life of your father's art. And it really is heartfelt, and that is something that we don't always get when we go to a museum and we see art. We don't get the story, and the story is what really makes it.
Yeah, in the parlance of the museum world, it's the provenance. It's okay, back it up. Most of the time, that's for like, where'd you buy it from? Did you have documentation and stuff like that? But the provenance here is the very photo of him making a toy, and the toy is right there. But when we did the documentation, I set up this spreadsheet. Okay, there's 400 line items, so right off the bat, it's a big spreadsheet. Okay, and then all the columns. How much does it weigh, and what is the size of it? What material is it? Last column. You remember an anecdote about this particular piece? Oh yeah. Now I'm going back. Okay, now it's like 1960 something. What did Dad say about this? And now I'm like constantly cranking these little anecdotes out. I'm not making these up. These are things that happened. These are things that were said. This is the reason he made it. This is who he made it for. And all of that comes together into this like spectacle of all this stuff. This consumes me, by the way. So I have a TV show. So in Methuen, So what happened was I went to the library. Libraries are wonderful places. And I said, I have this artwork. I just moved up here. Why don't we connect? So they said, okay, fine. And we had an exhibit. I gave a talk. And it went over very well. Next thing I know, there's another case in the library, and it's got somebody else's stuff in it. Well, it happened to have some things that had to do with television equipment. Television equipment. There's got to be a TV station here in Methuen. Look it up, call them up, and say, I just saw your stuff in the case at the library. How about if we get together, and is there a way that we can do some kind of television thing with this collection? The woman says to me, I've been waiting for you to call me. Out of where? How do you know who I am? She said, oh, the librarian called me and told me that you had a wonderful display here. So she said, I should be talking to you, and here you are calling me. I said, oh my God. So why don't you come in? All right. What do you want to do? Well, do you want to do a half an hour program on your father's art? You want to do a half-hour program on the baseball gloves that I repair? This is my side gig, okay? Take old baseball gloves and bring them back to life. Yeah, we can do both. Okay, fine. We do 2 television episodes for another program. At the end of it, she says, would you like to have a TV program of your own? And I go, what? This is like, are you talking to me? And she says, I think you'd be very good. All right, I'll think about it. I'll get back to you. Okay, I'll do the program. What do you want to call it? I said, well, my father was my muse. Why don't we call the program Following Your Muse? So all of a sudden, I'm the producer and host of a TV show called Following Your Muse, and my job is to find people, preferably who have a connection with Methuen, to say, okay, what turns you on? What's your hot button? And so these people are showing up, and I find them, or they find me, I guess. And the last one, the woman comes on, and talk about bringing it down to the very core, the essence. She's got a tumor on the back of her brain. They have operated and removed, say, 90% of this thing. They can't get the other 10% out. You're going to live with this for the rest of your life. And we don't know how long you're going to live. Pretty sad story. Why would I want her, right? She says, you want me to come on because I'm the most positive person. I'm going to tell you how people are going to have a problem like I have and lift themselves up and say, I'm not going to become a couch potato and say, I'm done. I'm not done. I got a whole life to live. So she comes on, and for a half an hour, she and her husband are telling me all the positive things that they're doing. And at the end of the program, the crew comes over and says to me, this is really down and dirty stuff. This is amazing that this woman talks like this. So in Armenian, ur deren ur, who would have known that all my father's art from 40 years ago would enable me to be a guest here, to be a host on a TV show? Who would have known all this stuff? So I just love the whole thing. Well, I did write some of them down, but everything's in my head. It's
I'm just thinking about like my mother's basement, and I know there are precious things, but there's a lot of stories I don't know. It's so wonderful that you're writing.
we were very fortunate that before everybody passed away, my mother wrote everything down. A lot of little pieces of paper stuck in an envelope, and that included things like the family tree. So I use a lot of graphics in my business. So I took Mom's 1,000 little paper notes, both sides of the family, which she had done, and I made a graphic, and I assigned one suit of a deck of cards to each of the 4 grandparents. Okay, so this is the diamonds, and this is the spades, and etc. And I laid it all out, and the whole thing fell into place. Thank you, Mom. And there were things like that with the art collection, too. It also helped that some of the pieces were dated. So if it had my sister's birthday, that's what it was. It's been a great 10 years. And then I went to school and had a blast. I had a blast. I'm with people who are half my age. You know, I'm talking to 30-year-olds that, you know, are at a point in their career they have to get a master's or, what do they say, you know, publish or perish, you know. So they had to get their master's degree to move up in their chosen field. And these were all my compatriots here, you know, in this class. So I just had a blast. It was a lot of fun. So as I said, when little Bedros was born, I sent an announcement out. I think I may have sent one to you. He came out and he's looking like this. There's a picture of him looking like this. And I wrote up a little thing saying that the champeen, a little play on the word champion, the champeen is born, okay, has arrived. And I wrote, life is good. And that's what it is. Life is good. I think my father would be tickled pink right now if he saw all of this stuff going on all the time. And if I ever get my act together, we'll have a little book. You're welcome to say, if you want to be on the list of people for, I have your contact, I have your contact, I have yours. I don't have your contacts. If you want to give them to me, you're welcome to. So that's it. I'm done. It's a lot of fun. It's just a lot of fun for me. Oh, the pieces. Yes. Head that way, and I'll come over. I'll come over and give you a little description. Did you ever see them when they were... Oh, do you want... let me get this mic off. Courtney, you want to take this mic off before I announce to the whole...